Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. Hello everyone. My name is Hafizah Pertiwi from English Department 1, and I make this video to fulfill my advanced translation assignment. Happy watching. So today I would like to explain about methods and techniques of translation. But first, what is translation? Translation is a rare medium and useful connection to communicate with other people in different language, culture, and background. By the existence of translation, it can help people to share any perspective of this world. People are able to share information, knowledge, ideas, and a lot of things to each other. There are many differences, both source language and target language, like the structure, culture, and style. Therefore, translation is very useful for people who do not have good ability in understanding source language, so they need help to translate it into the target language. But translation is not an easy thing to do, as it can be difficult to establish its equivalents, such as in English change into Indonesian or vice versa, since there are some different system and structure between those languages. The system and structure in source language and target language may become the obstacles if the translator faces difficulties to discover the equivalents of both languages. But the translator can transmit the source language to the target language text by using some translation method and technique in making the readers can understand about the translation in the target language. That's why on this occasion, I would like to explain about the methods and techniques of translation. First, methods. Based on Newmark's book entitled A Textbook of Translation in 1988, there are 8 translation methods in translating. The 8 methods are separated into 2 classifications: source language emphasis and target language emphasis. Source language emphasis consists of word-for-word translation, literal translation, faithful translation, and semantic translation. And target language emphasis consists of adaptation translation, free translation, idiomatic translation, and communicative translation. First, word-for-word translation. Newmark in 1988 states that the source language word order is preserved and the words translated by their most common meanings. So in translating text with word-for-word translation, the translator uses common word. Newmark also states that the main use of word-for-word translation is either to understand the mechanics of the source language or construe difficult text as a per-translation process. So word-for-word translation translates each word or phrase that is understood but doesn't take grammar into account, and it can be out of context at times, especially in idioms and proverbs. It's often associated with scientific, technical, and technological or legal texts. Example: source language, you'll be crazy when you read it. Target language, kamu akan menjadi gila ketika membaca itu. Second, literal translation. Newmark notes that in literal translation, the source language grammatical constructions are converted to their nearest target language equivalents, but the lexical words are again translated singly out of context. It means that when the translators translate, the word is translated literally from source language into target language. So it is a translation of a text done by translating each word separately without looking at how the words are used together in a phrase or sentence. It is the rendering of text from one language to another language with or without conveying the sense of the original. In translation studies, literal translation denotes technical translation of scientific, technical, technological, or legal text, but literal translation usually mistranslates idioms. Example: source language, I never wrote you any letters. Target language, aku tidak pernah menulis surat apapun untukmu. Third, faithful translation. Newmark declares that a faithful translation attempts to reproduce the precise contextual meaning of the original within the constraint of the target language grammatical structures. It means that in faithful translation, the translator translates the meaning from source language to convey the researcher's intention. This method tries to reproduce the precise contextual meaning of the original within the constraint of the target language grammatical structure. It transfers cultural words faithfully following the source language grammatical form. Faithful translation simply means the translator aims to convey the other's intention of the text or what the other was intending to communicate as faithfully as possible into another language. Example: source language, Caca's mouth fell open with amazement. Target language, mulut Caca terbuka dengan kekaguman. Fourth, semantic translation. Newmark states that semantic translation may translate less important cultural words by culturally neutral verb or functional terms but not by cultural equivalence, and it may make other small concessions to the readership. Semantic translation differs from faithful translation only in as far as it must take more account of the aesthetic value, that is the beautiful and natural sound of the source language text, compromising on meaning where appropriate so that no nonsense, wordplay or repetition jars in the finished version. The distinction between faithful and semantic translation is that the first is uncompromising the dogmatic, while the second is more flexible, admits the creative exception to 100% fidelity, and allows for the translator's intuitive empathy with the original. Example, source language, dia adalah orang yang gemar belanja. Target language, she's a soulful lake. Fifth, adaptation translation. Adaptation translation method is the suitable method to translate literary works. The translator could adapt the source language freely into the target language. As Newmark says that this is the freest form translation. It is used to translate literary works like comedy, poetry, short story, narrative, etc. And the source language culture is converted to the target language culture and the text is rewritten. The deplorable practice of having a play or poem literally translated and then rewritten by an established dramatist or poet has produced many poor adaptations, but other adaptations have rescued period plays. Example, source language, you'll be crazy when you read it. Target language, kamu akan terperangah ketika membacanya. 6. Free translation. Newmark states that free translation is part of in target language emphasis which reproduce the matter without the manner or the content without the form of the original. Usually, it is a paraphrase much longer than the original, a so-called interlingual translation, often prolix and pretentious, and not translation at all. Example, source language, sambil menyelam minum air. Target language, killing two birds with one stone. 7. Idiomatic translation. Idiomatic translation reproduces the message of the original, but tends to distort nuance of meaning by preferring colloquialism and idioms where these do not exist in the original. The translator tried to find the meaning of idiom and use the word choices correctly for target language. For example, source language, ini sangat mudah. Target language, it's a piece of cake. 8. Communicative translation. Communicative translation tries to render the exact contextual meaning of the original in such a way that both content and language are readily acceptable or comprehensible to the readership. It is often used for informative text. Example, source language, awas ada anjing. Target language, beware of dog. Second material, techniques of translation. So I would like to explain 11 techniques of translation, that is adaptation, amplification, borrowing, calque, compensation, discursive creation, established equivalence, literal translation, and modulation. First, adaptation. Adaptation is a technique that replaces the source language cultural elements with one which has the same condition and situation in the target language culture. The translators have to create or make a new situation that can be considered as being equivalent both in source language and target language. For example, source language, they're here in my four-dimensional pocket. Target language, mereka di dalam kantung ajaibku. In the example, the translator uses adaptation technique in translating source language into target language. Kantung ajaib in target language is general terms in the Doraemon movie series that the term of 4D pocket. Indonesian viewers are more familiar with kantung ajaib. Second, amplification or addition. Amplification is a technique that can feed details that are not formulated or stated in source language. It can be either information or paraphrasing explicitly. It is same with addition or gain. It also can be called grammatical expansion for clarity of meaning. For example, source language, good morning, you're early today. Target language, selamat pagi, kau datang lebih awal hari ini. In the example, the translator uses addition technique of you're early today change into kau datang lebih awal hari ini. Translator translates the early into datang lebih awal. If it is translated literally, it will be kau lebih awal hari ini. Translator adds the word datang as verb in target language to add information about certain person's activity clearly. Third, borrowing. Borrowing is a technique that takes a word or expression straight from another language. It can be copied, reproduced, translated, or changed in target language exactly as in source language. When expression or word is taken over purely in target language or without change, it is called pure borrowing. In naturalized borrowing, it can be naturalized to fit the spelling rules in the target language or with changing. For example, source language, it will make Shizuka hate you, so will everyone else do. Target language, itu akan membuat Shizuka membencimu, begitu juga orang lain. In the example, translator uses borrowing technique, the name Shizuka in source language into Shizuka in target language. It shows the word is purely borrowed from the original into target language. Translator takes the word Shizuka directly from one language into another without change. Word Kolk. Kolk, also called as loan translation. It is a technique translation of the word or phrase from the source language into target language, which can be lexical or structural system. It also can translation word for word in a language into another language. For example, translates each word literally. Example, source language, I'll take her to anywhere door. Target language, akan kubawa dia ke pintu kemana saja. In the example, the translators use call technique or phrase anywhere door in source language which is translated into pintu kemana saja in target language. Translator translates anywhere in target language is translated into kemana saja, while the door is translated into pintu. Here, the anywhere door is a phrase which translates literally into phrase in target language. Fifth, compensation. Compensation is a technique that introduces source language element of information or stylistic effect in another place in the target language because it cannot be reflected in the same place as in the source language. Example, source language, I was so moved that I couldn't stop crying. Target language, aku sangat terharu hingga tidak bisa berhenti menangis. 6. Discursive creation. Discursive creation is a technique that replaces a term or expression with a description of its form or and function. This technique is often used in the translation of the title of film, movie, or book to indicate equivalence that can only be valid in a certain context. For example, source language, Stand By Me Doraemon. Target language, Tetaplah Bersamaku Doraemon. In the example, translator translates the title of the movie Stand By Me, changed into Tetaplah Bersamaku, to indicate the equivalence that is totally unpredictable out of the context. If the title in source language is translated literally or lexically based on the dictionary, the translation truly different with the intended meaning by the translator. The translations of movie in target language is enough for presenting about the story of movie. 7. Establish equivalence. It is a technique that uses term or expression which is recognized in dictionary or language in use and everyday use as an equivalence in the target language. It is used to revert to cases where language describes the same situation by different stylistic or structural. For example, source language, Thank you Doraemon, I owe everything to you. Target language, Terima kasih Doraemon, aku berutang besar padamu. In the example, the translator uses established equivalence technique. The word thanks in source language to be terima kasih in target language. Translator uses expression which is recognized in daily conversation. Thanks into terima kasih. It is expression which is used for someone that say grateful for a person for something. 8. Literal translation. It is a technique that translates a word or an expression in word for word. The source language is translated literally and focuses on the form and structure without any addition or deduction into target language. For example, source language, You can play ball with us today. Target language, Kau bisa bermain bola bersama kami hari ini. In the example, translator focuses on source language has same form and structure to target language. The structure, source language and target language is subject plus auxiliary plus verb plus object plus complement. The source language is formed by you plus can plus play plus ball plus with us today. If it is separated word for word, it will be you equal to kau, can equal to bisa, play equal to bermain, ball equal to bola, with equal to bersama, us equal to kita, and today equal to hari ini. 9. Modulation. Modulation is a technique that changes the point of view in the target language in order to focus our cognitive category in relation to source language. It is a variation of the form of the message obtained by a change to the point of view. It allows in expressing the same phenomenon in different way. For example, source language. Hey Nobi, you're early again. Target language. Halo Nobita, kau tak terlambat lagi. In the example, the translator changed the point of view in source language to target language, but still has same message or meaning of the utterance spoken in source language. If it is translated into target language to be Halo Nobita, kau datang lebih awal lagi, it has some meaning or message toward the translation of Halo Nobita, kau tak terlambat lagi in target language. 11. Reduction or omission. Reduction is a technique that reduces certain elements of the source language. It also called elimination, omissions, or subtraction, which is suppressing a source language or information in the target language. For example, source language. Mom, why don't you wake me? Target language. Mengapa kau tidak membangunkan aku? In the example, translator use reduction technique. Translator reduces the noun mom in target language. If the other in source language translated literally, it will be ibu, kenapa kau tidak membangunkanku? There is reduction word mom or ibu. 11. Transposition or shift. Transposition is a technique that changes a grammatical category in relation to the source language. This technique same with shift in category, structure, and unit shifts, such as changing singular to plural, position of adjective, changing the word, class, or part of speech. For example, source language. The cottage is still far away. Target language. Pondokan masih sangat jauh. In the example, the translator translates the cottage become pondokan. From this data, it can be found transposition or shift. There is unit shift from the cottage in the source language to pondokan in target language. In source language, the form is noun phrase changed into noun. It is clear that the cottage is noun phrase and the target language pondokan is noun. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much for watching my video. Akhirul kalam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.